On her wedding night, when the moon was full and high in the sky, my sister Nneka turned into a snake. It all started months ago, but to truly understand, you have to know Nneka's past. Our parents passed away when she was just a child. No one talks much about them, but I remember it well. They were found in the forest one morning, their bodies twisted in unnatural ways, eyes wide open as if they had seen something horrible. Their mouths were filled with dirt, like they had been trying to eat the earth itself. No one could explain what had happened, and some whispered that it was the work of dark spirits. NECA and I were left alone after that, raised by the village, but really, we only had each other. NECA was the bravest of us, even though I was older. She refused to let the mystery of our parents' absence haunt her. She would still go into the same forest that took our parents, hunting for bushmeat to feed us. She said it was just a forest, nothing more. Indeed, she was the bravest girl in our village, always bringing back rabbits, antelope, and sometimes even wild birds. That day, she set out alone as she often did. The forest, though dark and thick, had never scared her before. But this time was different. On the path, NECA met an old woman sitting under a tree, her back bent like a broken branch. The woman's face was hidden by a scarf, and her voice was raspy when she spoke. "Where are you going, child?" NECA told her she was hunting, and the woman smiled in a way that made her shiver. She handed NECA a strange-looking fruit. "Take this for strength," the woman said, "but be careful. Don't anger the forest." NECA didn't want to seem rude, so she accepted it, thinking nothing of it. After all, what harm could an old woman do? That night, the moon was full. When NECA returned home, she felt strange, her skin itching, her throat dry. Before she could speak, her body began to change. Her legs melted into one long, scaly tail. Her skin turned cold and rough. She was no longer NECA, she was a snake. But by morning, she was back to herself, shaking with fear, but human again. NECA never spoke of that night to anyone, not even to me, her only sister. But the curse returned with every full moon. Each time she would slither into the forest and hide until morning came. She thought she could keep it a secret. And she did, until her wedding night. As the full moon approached, NECA grew more anxious with each passing night. She had become skilled at hiding her transformations, slipping away into the forest before anyone could notice the change. But one evening, just as the moon began to rise, her sister HARDA came looking for her. It was an hour before the moon would be fully in the sky, and NECA could already feel the familiar tingling in her skin, the shift beginning deep inside her bones. She had told HARDA she was going to collect water from the river, hoping to get away before the transformation took hold. But as she hurried toward the forest's edge, HARDA spotted her. "NECA!" HARDA called, catching up to her sister. "Let me come with you. It's getting late and the forest is dangerous at night." NECA's heart raced. She had never let anyone see her during the full moon, not even HARDA. "No," she said quickly, her voice tight. "I won't be long. Stay with the others. I just need a moment alone." HARDA frowned, confused by NECA's unusual behavior. After all, NECA had always been the independent one, the one who preferred solitude, especially after the strange passing of their parents. "All right," HARDA said softly, stepping back. "But be careful. Don't stay out too long." NECA nodded quickly and disappeared into the trees, her heart pounding as she ran deeper into the forest. She barely made it to her hiding spot before the change took over, completely, her legs fusing into a long, scaly tail. From her hiding place, she watched the full moon rise through the trees, her mind racing with fear. She had come so close to being discovered, but HARDA had simply let it go. trusting her sister as she always had. Nneka breathed a sigh of relief, knowing she had avoided suspicion once again, for now. As the full moon cycle became harder to control, Nneka knew she couldn't keep running into the forest every month. The curse was growing stronger, and each transformation left her more exhausted and afraid. Desperate for answers, she decided to seek help from the village priest, Chike, known for his wisdom and connection to the spiritual world. Nneka had avoided him for a long time, fearful of what he might say, but she was running out of options. One afternoon she approached his shrine, her heart heavy with hope and fear. Chike sat quietly by the entrance, the air thick with the smell of burning herbs and dried leaves. "Father, I need your help," Nneka said, her voice low and trembling. She explained what had happened in the forest with the old woman, the fruit she ate, and the terrifying curse that turned her into a snake with every full moon. She pleaded with him to break the spell, hoping that his spiritual powers could save her. But as she spoke, the priest's expression grew darker. When she finished, Chike shook his head slowly, his face full of concern.
"Child, the forces you speak of are beyond me,"
he said gravely.
"This is no ordinary curse. The woman you met in the forest, she is tied to powers much older and much darker than anyone dares to confront. This is the work of ancient spirits, and their reach goes far beyond our world. I cannot help you, and I would advise you not to seek help from anyone else. The price for interfering with such forces could be far greater than you can imagine."
Nneka felt her stomach drop. She had come to him as her last hope, but now she realized there was no escape. Even the village priest, with all his knowledge of the spiritual realm, was too afraid to challenge the curse. She left the shrine that day feeling more alone than ever, knowing she would have to face the full moon and the curse on her own. Nneka and Chike's first meeting was pure chance, but it felt like fate. Nneka was deep in the forest, tracking a wild antelope, her bow ready, her focus sharp. She had never needed help when it came to hunting, but that day as she crept silently through the brush, an arrow whizzed past her, striking the antelope just before she could release her own. Startled, she turned to see a tall figure emerge from the trees. Chike, his bow still raised.
"I hope I didn't steal your catch,"
he said, his voice warm but playful. Nneka, not one to back down, smirked and replied, "Only if you plan to share." After that, they began to run into each other more often in the forest. At first, it seemed like coincidence, but soon it was clear that they were seeking each other out. They would track game together, exchanging stories of their hunts and their villages as they walked through the undergrowth. Chike admired Nneka's skill and courage, but what drew him in most was her spirit. She was fearless, fiercely independent, and yet there was a softness in her that he could see when they were alone. Nneka too found herself drawn to Chike's strength, but more than that, she admired his kindness. He had a quiet confidence, never boastful, always respectful, and he treated her as an equal, something she rarely found. One evening, as they sat by the river after a long day of hunting, the sun setting in the distance, Chike gently took her hand. The air was cool, the sound of the water calming, and for the first time, Nneka felt her guard lower.
"I've been waiting for a reason to spend more time in this forest,"
Chike said, his thumb brushing lightly over her palm. Nneka smiled, her heart racing in a way it never had before, not from fear or danger, but from something new. "Maybe the forest isn't so bad after all," she whispered, leaning into him, the two of them sitting together in the quiet, the rest of the world slipping away. Not everyone was happy about Nneka and Chike's growing bond. Among those who had reservations was Chike's older brother, Obi. Like Chike, Obi was a skilled hunter, but he had a more serious nature and was always cautious, especially when it came to matters of the heart. From the moment he first heard about Chike's interest in NECA, he had his suspicions. Obi had long heard strange rumors about NECA and her family, the mysterious deaths of her parents, whispers that she spent too much time alone in the forest, and the fact that strange things seemed to happen when she was around. While most of the village brushed off these rumors as just old wives' tales, Obi wasn't so sure. Obi began to voice his concerns to Chike.
You need to think carefully about this woman.
He warned one evening as they sat by the fire after a hunt.
There's something off about her, something that doesn't feel right. Everyone knows the stories about her family. And why does she always go into the forest alone? What is she hiding?
But Chike, already deeply in love, dismissed his brother's words.
NECA is different, yes, but that's what I love about her. She's strong, independent, and she's been through more than most people can imagine. The forest doesn't scare her like it does others. It's not her fault people gossip,
Chike said firmly. Obi, however, refused to be swayed. His instincts as a hunter told him something was wrong, and he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that NECA was not who she seemed.
You can't ignore the signs, Chike. There are always truths in rumors. Be careful before you make this decision. A hunter knows when something is wrong, even if he can't see it clearly.
Chike, frustrated with his brother's warnings, refused to listen, convinced that love was more powerful than suspicion. But Obi's doubts would linger, and soon the truth would reveal itself in a way none of them could have imagined. Everyone said they were perfect for each other except Obi, of course. The wedding was beautiful, the dancing loud, the food plenty. But as the night grew late, the moon rose again, bright and round. On their wedding night, as the full moon reached its peak, and the inevitable transformation began, Chike watched in horror as Nneka's body twisted and contorted, her legs fusing together into a long, scaly tail. He felt his heart stop for a moment, seeing the woman he loved turn into a creature of nightmares. But instead of fleeing like most would have, Chike's fear was quickly replaced by determination. He had always known that NECA was different, and now he understood why. As NECA lay on the floor, her snake coiling in shame and fear, she expected Chike to scream, to run, or to call the villagers. But instead, he knelt beside her.
I'm not leaving you,
he whispered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them.
We'll find a way to fix this. We'll fight this together.
His words broke through her terror, and for the first time since the curse had taken hold of her, NECA felt a glimmer of hope. Chike's unwavering bravery in the face of the impossible filled her with strength. He wasn't afraid of the curse or the dark magic that had bound her. He was only afraid of losing her. The next morning, after the transformation passed and NECA returned to her human form, they sat together and made a decision. They would not hide any longer. Chike and Nneka began visiting every neighboring village, seeking out priests, herbalists, and wise elders who might have knowledge of ancient curses. Hand in hand, they traveled for days and weeks, telling their story to anyone who would listen, hoping that somewhere, someone might hold the key to breaking the spell. Though many turned them away or were too afraid to get involved, Chike refused to give up. He stood by NECA through each full moon, protecting her when she transformed, always searching for a solution. Together, they faced the unknown, determined to break the curse no matter how long it took. After many full moons had passed, NECA and Chike's journey to find a cure felt endless. They had traveled far beyond the borders of their village, seeking answers in distant lands. Each time the moon grew full, NECA would transform again, and though the weight of the curse pressed heavily on them both, Chike never faltered. They had been turned away by many priests and healers who feared the dark forces surrounding the curse. And as hope began to wane, they arrived at a small, humble village nestled deep within a thick forest. It was there they met an old priest named Ezeudo. Ezeudo was unlike any other they had encountered. His eyes were sharp with wisdom, and his small shrine was filled with strange ancient relics. When Chike and Nneka told him their story, he listened carefully, his brow furrowed but his gaze steady. Unlike the others, Ezeudo didn't shy away when he heard of the curse or the power of the ancient woman who had cast it. He stroked his beard thoughtfully and finally spoke.
The forces at play here are indeed powerful, but every curse, no matter how dark, can be broken if one is willing to face the dangers that come with challenging it.
Chike and Nneka exchanged hopeful glances.
You mean you can help us?
Chike asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of hope and fear. Ezeudo nodded slowly.
I will help you, but you must understand, there will be great risk. This curse is tied to old spirits, ones that do not let go easily. If we are to break it, I must call upon forces just as old, and you must be prepared for whatever comes. This will not be easy, but if you are brave enough to stand against these spirits, there may be a way to free NECA.
Without hesitation, Chike took Nneka's hand and said,
We are ready.
NECA, though fearful of the unknown, felt a surge of courage. For the first time in a long while, they felt like there was a chance to reclaim their future. The priest agreed to begin preparations immediately, knowing that the next full moon would be their best chance. With Ezeudo's guidance, they began a ritual that would confront the spirits head-on, setting in motion the final battle against the curse that had haunted NECA for so long. As the full moon approached, and the preparations for the ritual continued, the old priest Ezeudo began uncovering more about the origins of NECA's curse. One night, as they sat in his dimly lit shrine, the smell of burning herbs heavy in the air, he asked NECA to speak of her mother, of anything she remembered. NECA was hesitant at first. Her mother had died when she was young and there were few memories she could hold on to. But as she spoke, bits and pieces of the past began to surface. Ezeudo listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each word. He stood up slowly and began to sift through ancient scrolls and relics that cluttered his shrine. Finally, he found what he was looking for, a tattered piece of parchment covered in symbols neither NECA nor Chike could understand.
I fear this might be the truth,
Ezeudo said, his voice grave.
The curse placed upon you is not just a random act of malice. It is rooted deep within your bloodline, tied to your mother and her past.
NECA and Chike exchanged confused looks. What do you mean? NECA asked, her voice trembling. Ezeudo sighed and sat back down, looking at NECA with a deep sadness in his eyes.
Your mother was not an ordinary woman. She was born a bush baby, a spirit child. Her family, her siblings, were creatures of the forest, able to take on different forms, some as animals, others as shadows or spirits. But your mother was different. She had the rare power to transform permanently into a human, something none of her siblings could do. When she cut ties with her family to live as a human, she did so because she fell in love with your father, a mortal man.
NECA's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard anything like this before. So, my mother was one of them? A bush baby?
Yes.
Ezeudo nodded.
And her family did not take kindly to her choice to abandon them for a human life. She severed her ties with them when she chose to marry your father. But such decisions have consequences. The spirits and ancient forces that bound her to the forest were not pleased. They let her live her life in peace for a time, but when you were born, they saw an opportunity. You are of their blood, NECA, and they placed the curse upon you as punishment for your mother's betrayal.
The realization hit NECA like a wave. Her mother's mysterious past, her parents' strange deaths, everything made sense now. The curse wasn't just an act of random evil, it was revenge. Nneka's transformation into a snake was a twisted reminder of the forms her mother's siblings could take, of the life her mother had left behind. The dark forces wanted to claim Nneka, to pull her back into their world, to remind her of the family her mother had abandoned. With the truth about her mother's past finally revealed, Nneka realized that the only way to break the curse was to make peace with her mother's spirit family, the Bush Babies. Ezeudo, the village priest, explained that the appeasement ritual alone would not be enough. Nneka would have to visit her mother's family in the deep forest, the very place where the curse originated, and ask for their forgiveness. On the night of the full moon, under Ezeudo's guidance, Nneka and Chike ventured into the heart of the forest. It was a place even the bravest hunters avoided, said to be home to spirits and creatures that no man could tame. But Nneka wasn't afraid. She was determined, knowing that this was her only chance to reclaim her life. Chike stayed by her side, his hand never leaving hers as they walked deeper into the unknown. When they finally reached the spot Ezeudo had shown them, a clearing bathed in moonlight, Nneka called out to her mother's spirit family. The air grew thick with a strange energy, and one by one, her mother's siblings appeared, each taking a different form. Some as animals, others as shadows moving through the trees. Their eyes glowed with the power of the forest, and their presence sent a chill through the air. Nneka could feel the weight of their disappointment and anger toward her mother's decision to leave them. One of the spirits, in the form of a massive snake with glowing green eyes, spoke.
Your mother chose a path that we could never forgive, it hissed. She turned her back on us to live as a human, forsaking her true family. And you, her daughter, carry her betrayal in your blood.
Nneka knelt before them, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. I never knew the truth of my mother's past, she began, but now I understand the pain she caused you. I have come not to fight or deny her actions, but to ask for your forgiveness. I am not my mother. I seek peace for myself and for my future family. The spirits hissed and murmured among themselves, their forms shifting in and out of the shadows. After what felt like an eternity, the snake spirit spoke again.
We will forgive you, Nneka, but on one condition. You and your household must never harm anything that lives in the bush. You will respect the creatures of the forest as your mother should have taught you. And you will visit us often so that the bond between our worlds is never broken again.
Nneka nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I agree, she whispered. Chike, standing beside her, placed his hand on her shoulder, showing his support. Though they were hunters by trade, Chike was willing to sacrifice that life for the woman he loved. Stood the significance of respecting the forest and its inhabitants. We are part of two worlds, Nneka would say, her voice filled with warmth and pride. And we must learn to live in harmony with both. Each month they took their family to the sacred clearing where Nneka had first encountered her mother's family. There, they would leave offerings of fruits and herbs as tokens of gratitude, sharing stories of their lives and successes. Nneka and Chike encouraged their children to feel the presence of the bush babies and to understand the lessons they embodied. The value of respect, humility, and connection to nature. As the children grew, they too became part of the ritual, learning the importance of their heritage and the responsibilities that came with it. With each visit, the bond between the family and the spirit strengthened. Nneka and Chike's children learned to see the forest not just as a source of livelihood, but as a living entity filled with wisdom and magic. They passed down the story of their family, the trials they faced, and the significance of their pact with the bush babies to generations. And so, in the warmth of their home, surrounded by laughter and love, NECA and Chike's legacy lived on, forever intertwined with the spirits of the forest and the promise they had made to honor their past. I love to hear your thoughts and the lessons you learnt in this story in the comment section. I have lots of stories and folk tales about African traditions to bring to you. Click the subscribe button and notification bell so that you will be the first to watch my next story.